Good evening. The fate of Ukraine appears to be reaching crisis point, with Russia expected to launch an all-out assault on the country tonight. Ukraine's main towns have now been hit by as many as 250 missiles, and Russian troops are now on the ground in the city of Kharkiv. Residents, meantime, in the capital, Kiev, are taking cover amid fears Russia could unleash its deadliest weapon yet. Carrie-Anne Greenbank has today's developments.
The sound and the pulsing glow of a country under attack. The city of Kharkiv in eastern Ukraine under fire. More than 250 missiles have now been launched by Russian forces, turning to rubble any claim by the Kremlin it's only targeting military sites. But in a symbol of resistance, the Ukrainian soldier walks resolutely into battle, cradling his anti-tank missile underarm. This is Europe today, unthinkable just a week or two ago. By morning in Kharkiv just hours ago, Russian patrol vehicles breaking through the central part of the city, rolling through the streets as residents were told to remain in shelters. In the country's capital, Kiev, nowhere is safe, but bravery is everywhere. These women, machine guns in hand, joining the front line to fight.
I just want to live in our country, and that's all.
Their city is under siege, a civilian apartment block blasted by a missile. The wounded were carried away, 6 people seriously injured and at least 2 killed. The United Nations says the invasion has so far killed at least 240 Ukrainians, including 3 children, a figure which in reality is believed to be much higher. The intensity of fighting on Kiev streets evident in burnt-out military vehicles, which Ukrainian forces say was a Russian convoy. As night fell, now familiar sounds echoed across the capital. There was this roar in the middle of the night, says this 89-year-old woman who hid in the cellar while she heard blasts for an hour. President Zelensky telling the nation his army still controls Kiev. They wanted to block the centre of our state and settle their puppets here. We broke their plans. And on a US offer to evacuate him, he said, "The fight is here. I need ammunition, not a ride." Just south of the capital, another Russian strike, sending a missile straight into an oil depot. Thick plumes of smoke swallowing the sky. But firefighters can't reach the raging flames. They're blocked by Russian forces who are moving to take over the vassal Kyiv airbase. It's a key corridor into Kiev. Former professional boxer turned Kiev Mayor Vitaly Klitschko warned of saboteurs in the city. A curfew is now in place until Monday morning, as his brother, former world champion Vladimir Klitschko, made a plea to the world.
Just today, civilians were shot by the rockets. With special operations, civilians getting killed. And it's happening in the heart of Europe.
And ordinary civilians showed extraordinary courage to the north of Kiev, stepping in front of Russian tanks to stop their advance, at least for a while. In Dnipro, in central Ukraine, more people power. This city has so far evaded attack by Russian forces, but its people are preparing.
Hundreds and hundreds of people here in Dnipro who have come to the centre of town, and they are in the process here, in this section, of making Molotov cocktails.
Putin said that in Ukraine the people will meet Russian soldiers with the flowers. And preparing the Molotov cocktail. This is the flowers for Putin.
And others formed long queues at recruiting offices. Britain's Ministry of Defence says the speed of the Russian advance has slowed because of strong Ukrainian resistance and logistical difficulties. These Russian tanks in eastern Ukraine left stranded on the side of the road.
Сломались. Можно оттащить на Россию обратно.
But signs from inside Russia of reinforcements being sent in.
As the Russians moving more heavy equipment towards Ukraine.
As British intelligence warns, the capture of Kiev remains Russia's primary military objective. The streets of Kiev now eerily quiet apart from the sound of bells tolling. Shops and restaurants closed, some buildings boarded up in preparation for what's to come. A guarded city as Putin's troops mobilise its fearsome airburst weapons system, a deadly super-powered bomb capable of vaporising populations and reducing cities to rubble. But Ukraine is fighting back with a resistance the Kremlin didn't expect. The country's air force claiming it has shot down a Russian helicopter, and at least 200 more of those damaging missiles are now on their way to Ukrainian forces. In Kiev, Ukraine, Karianne Greenbank, 9 News.
Families are making a run for the border, desperate to flee the bombs and bullets of the Russian forces. Tens of thousands of refugees are now streaming into Poland, and that's likely to become millions as the war intensifies. Amelia Adams reports.
Relief and the warmest of hugs after a cold and dangerous journey.
My brother's wife, and we were waiting for her children.
But reunions here are bittersweet. This woman drove for 3 days with her toddler to reach family in Poland. Her husband stayed behind to fight.
I just want everyone to be safe.
We cannot sleep. There was no food, no water, no restrooms. We were standing like 2 days.
This 14-year-old girl is starting a new life.
My dad is still there with my dog and grandpa and grandma.
By foot, by car and by train, the exodus is growing by the day. More than 120,000 Ukrainians fleeing the country in 48 hours. At a station in Lviv, passengers succumb to the desperation and panic. As thousands escape a war they still can't fathom.
I want to survive because I have a family in Europe.
This mother is one of the lucky ones, clinging to her son. They were reunited in Hungary after another woman, a stranger, helped him walk out of Ukraine. No words, just tears. At border crossings, help has arrived. Aid agencies organising donations for those starting a new life. And amid the mass exodus, remarkably, cars queue to get into Ukraine, taking supplies and hoping to shuttle people back across the border.
Yeah, help.
What's striking is the number of women and children, elderly people crossing the border. Very few men, because the Ukrainian government has forced men aged between 18 and 60 to stay and defend the country, which means a lot of the people we're meeting here don't know when they'll see their husbands, their brothers, their sons again.
Those who've tried to flee stopped at checkpoints by Ukrainian soldiers. This bus driver was told to turn in all men of fighting age.
I really hope that I will be so lucky to cross the line, but I hear the man yelling that we all should come back.
OK, let's go to Amelia Adams, who is on the Poland-Ukraine border tonight. Amelia, thousands of Ukrainians are right now trying to get out.
Yeah, it is busy, a steady and endless stream, Alicia, of Ukrainians arriving, and where we are, they're being welcomed with open arms. Of course, the Polish know what it is to be displaced by war. Just an update on those numbers in the last couple of hours. It's now more than 150,000 Ukrainians who've fled since the conflict began, and not just to here, to neighbouring countries, Romania, Slovakia, Hungary as well. And the UN estimates that number could rise to 5 million people if the fighting with Putin's army continues and escalates. That would be a refugee crisis in Europe not seen since the end of World War II.
Absolutely. OK, Amelia Adams there at the border. Thank you. Let's go to our Europe correspondent now, Karianne Greenbank, who is still in the capital, Kiev. Kari, you are in a bunker as residents take shelter. Can you just show us what you are seeing there at the moment?
Well, Alicia, we're in the underground car park of this hotel, which doubles as a bunker, and that's where we'll be staying for the next full day at least because of this curfew that has come in. But what we're seeing here is we've got mattresses laid up for some people to sleep on. Other people have been sleeping in their cars or on chairs. There's around a dozen or so people here with us at the moment. That includes hotel staff, families with young children and people with their pets. Now, we're in a fortunate position because the staff here are still supplying us with basic food and water, but a lot of other people across this city aren't in that position, so aid agencies are now trying to work out how to get supplies to them. Now, before the curfew came in, we managed to briefly speak with some Ukrainian soldiers. They didn't want us to film them, but they did acknowledge that they are feeling nervous about what's to come, Alicia. For now, at least, Kiev remains under their control.
OK, Karianne there in the capital. Well, Ukrainians living in Melbourne have cried while marching through the city in honour of their families. Thousands peacefully protested for a stronger response to the Russian invasion. They spoke to Lana Murphy.
Divided by distance, but united in pain.
A lot of my relatives still there, fighting every day for their life.
The terror in Ukraine is personal for so many in Melbourne.
That's what's important, that someone hears us and stops him from ruining my country, taking lives from people.
Lara Korolyova fears her father and little sister won't survive till morning. Natalia Thompson expects her elderly mother will meet the same fate.
She lying on the floor in her apartment because they couldn't get a shelter. I was thinking today, maybe I got volunteer group and fly to Ukraine to defend my country. This is how I feel.
That emotion palpable as thousands march down the city's streets.
Stop that war!
Stop that war! Draped in yellow and blue for their beloved country, now stained red.
What do we want? Putin out! When do we want it? Now!
He's murdering all our people, all our land. He's taking everything away from us. We've put up with that once before. We don't want to put up with it again.
We don't want this war. Russians don't want this war. It's Putin and his bloody gang who wants this war.
Standing by their neighbours, Russians also burned with anger.
I can't be part of this. I will not.
Andrei's hands quivered as he set fire to his passport and visa.
That is over. I am Australian now.
Many of those taking part today are doing so simply because they don't know how else they can help. They're 13,000 kilometres away from the battleground. Some of their families uncontactable.
In bomb shelters and with kids and trying to escape with 97 years old grandmother.
Heartbreaking, and we're just helpless. So at least here we can feel we can support each other.
Age was no barrier as the group snaked its way into Federation Square, armed with a list of demands. One of them met within minutes of their arrival.
Australia will work with the United States and the United Kingdom to provide lethal aid to Ukraine.
Current and former politicians united against the enemy. Recognisable faces praying for peace too, lighting a candle at North Melbourne's Ukrainian church, where the reality of war was simply too much to bear.
I just pray that tonight when I call my parents, that they're still all safe and all fine.
Lana Murphy, 9 News.
And the West has ramped up efforts to stop Putin's war machine today, hitting Russia where it hurts. The US, EU and UK agreeing to cut Russia off from the banking system that connects nearly every country on earth. US correspondent Alison Petrowski reports.
A united EU pulling the trigger on a financial nuclear weapon.
The European Union and its partners are working to cripple Putin's ability to finance his war machine.
Europe, the world's largest economy, teaming up with the US and UK, expelling several Russian banks from the vital international payment system SWIFT, robbing them of their ability to do business with the rest of the world.
We've got to act together and we've got to do more.
Potent in its punishment, its ramifications will be widespread. The sanctions will affect normal people, regular citizens. In Russia, things will be sad and we will lag behind the rest of the civilised world. Russia is the largest supplier supplier of oil and gas to Europe. These banks selected to inflict maximum economic pain while trying to avoid an energy crisis. But it's still likely to result in higher prices for the West. We must prepare ourselves with lots of determination and also lots of solidarity.
We don't block it. This is not time being clever. This is time to be united.
This united front also electing to paralyse Russia's central bank, freezing its transactions, and launching a task force to hunt down and seize the holdings of sanctioned officials and oligarchs. The first catch already landed in the English Channel, a cargo ship linked to the son of a former Russian spy chief.
Putin embarked on a path aiming to destroy Ukraine. But what he's also doing, in fact, is destroying the future of his own country.
As world leaders crack down on Russia's aggression, protesters have taken to the streets around the world for a third day, voicing their support for Ukraine and hoping for an end to the violence.
10,000 gathered in Tel Aviv. In Mexico City, they posed as Russian brides outside the embassy. Politics continued to bleed into the world game. Chelsea owner and Russian billionaire Roman Abramovich handing over control of his Premier League club to avoid becoming a diplomatic target. And in Jerusalem, a pub is now running a contest to find itself a new name. Iconic landmarks lit up like the Ukrainian flag. Yellow and blue, now the colours of the fight for democracy. At the White House, Alison Petrowski, 9 News.
The Prime Minister has announced a dramatic increase in support for Ukraine, including the supply of lethal aid to help repel the Russian invasion. Political editor Chris Uhlmann explains what that would mean.
The Prime Minister has floated an extraordinary idea that Australia provide lethal aid to Ukraine. Essentially, what seems to be being floated is that we fund the Ukrainian resistance. There's very little detail in this, and clearly decisions are being made on the fly, but lethal aid means weapons, and the only way Australia could supply arms to Ukraine would be to buy them from an ally, most likely the United States or the United Kingdom, and to pay for them to be sent to Ukraine. It's highly unusual, and I can't think of a recent example of anything similar. But Ukraine is fighting alone. Neither NATO or countries like Australia will commit troops. So if the Ukrainian people want to keep fighting, they need arms and ammunition.
Chris Uhlmann there.